Back in the 60s, food wasn't just about eating, it was about making a statement. If you were serving beef Wellington or lobster thermidor, you weren't just feeding your guests, you were showing off your wealth and sophistication. This was the golden age of extravagant dinner parties, fancy French dishes, and tableside flambe. It was all about status and style, and the food was just as glamorous as the clothes and cocktails. So let's take a trip back to the glitzy world of 60s fine dining. From rich, buttery lobster Newburg to light, airy cheese soufflé, these are the top dishes that definitely meant you were upper class in the 60s. Beef Wellington.
Beef Wellington is one of those dishes everybody knows about.
Let's start things off with beef Wellington, the OG flex of fancy dinners. If you were served this back in the day, you knew you were living the high life. This dish was the ultimate showstopper, a perfectly cooked beef tenderloin coated in mushroom duxelles, basically a fancy mushroom paste, then wrapped in puff pastry and baked to golden perfection. It was rich, buttery, and ridiculously luxurious. When you sliced into it, you'd reveal perfectly pink, tender beef encased in golden, flaky layers of pastry. It was juicy, savory, and perfectly seasoned, with the mushroom layer adding an earthy umami punch that balanced the rich, buttery pastry. It was crisp on the outside, tender on the inside, and so flavorful it practically melted in your mouth. The glamour and flair of carving a beef Wellington tableside was a power move reserved for the fanciest dinner parties. If you were eating this, you weren't just rich, you were sophisticated. For those who craved seafood decadence, lobster Newburg was the next level of luxe as lobster Newburg.
Again, are you serving this like as an appetizer? I'm really curious to see how it tastes though. It smells delicious. Canned lobster, who knew?
If beef Wellington was about glamour and drama, lobster Newburg was about rich, buttery decadence. This wasn't just lobster, it was lobster swimming in a creamy sauce made from cognac, sherry, egg yolks, and heavy cream. Served over toast points or in a pastry shell, it was rich, velvety, and ridiculously indulgent. This dish was rich, creamy, and oh so buttery. The lobster meat was sweet and tender, perfectly poached to stay juicy and flavorful. The sauce was thick, rich, and velvety, infused with cognac and sherry for a sophisticated kick. The egg yolks made it silky and creamy, coating every bite of lobster with a buttery, luxurious richness. Served in fancy silver chafing dishes or elegant pastry shells, it was all about theatrical presentation. And let's be real, it was ridiculously rich. This was the kind of dish you ate slowly, savoring every luxurious bite. For those who preferred something a little more dramatic, duck à l'orange was the next showstopper. Duck à l'orange.
This is roast duck. We're going to serve it with a orange-flavored sauce. Canard à l'orange, one of the most famous of all duck recipes.
All right, if you really wanted to flex on your dinner guests in the 60s, you served duck à l'orange. Imagine crispy roasted duck coated in a glossy orange sauce that was sweet, tangy, and just a little bit bitter. It was fancy, flavorful, and beautifully dramatic. The magic was all in the balance of flavors. The duck was rich, juicy, and perfectly roasted, with a crispy, crackly skin that was golden and flavorful. It was rich and savory, with just enough fat to keep it juicy and tender. But the real star was the sauce, a perfectly balanced blend of sweet orange juice, tangy vinegar, sugar, and Grand Marnier, simmered down to a glossy, sticky glaze that coated the duck in a sweet, tangy, slightly bitter sheen. It was rich, sweet, tangy, and just a little bit smoky. For those who preferred something a little more refined, Chateaubriand was the next elegant choice. Chateaubriand. If duck à l'orange was all about drama and flair, Chateaubriand was about refinement and sophistication. This wasn't just a steak, it was a thick cut of tenderloin, roasted to perfection and served with rich béarnaise sauce. Paired with chateau potatoes, those perfectly shaped golden brown potato puffs, it was elegant, buttery, and ridiculously tender. Chateaubriand was all about simplicity and perfection. The beef tenderloin was buttery soft, perfectly cooked to be tender, juicy, and melt in your mouth, delicious. It was rich and flavorful without being overly seasoned, allowing the natural beefy flavor to shine. The béarnaise sauce was rich and buttery, made from egg yolks, clarified butter, tarragon, and vinegar, giving it a creamy, velvety texture that paired perfectly with the juicy, tender beef. This was the ultimate romantic dinner, carved tableside with a flourish and served with delicate golden potatoes. If you were eating this, you were elegant, refined, and definitely upper class. For those who craved a taste of luxury from from the sea, oysters Rockefeller were the next indulgent bite. Oysters Rockefeller.
I'm gonna be making something that is just near and dear to my heart, and that is oysters Rockefeller.
Nothing said, I've made it. Quite like oysters Rockefeller. These weren't raw on the half shell, they were plump, briny oysters, topped with a rich, buttery mixture of spinach, herbs, and breadcrumbs, then broiled until golden and bubbly. The oysters were briny and tender, with a salty, oceanic flavor that was bold and satisfying. They were topped with a rich, creamy mixture made from spinach, parsley, butter, garlic, and breadcrumbs, giving them a savory, herbaceous topping that was crisp and golden. The buttery topping melted into the plump, juicy oysters, creating a rich, briny bite that was creamy, savory, and just a little salty. Served on the half shell over a bed of rock salt or crushed ice, they looked elegant and impressive, like tiny works of art. Some people even added a splash of Pernod, an anise-flavored liqueur, for a subtle licorice note. It was rich, creamy, herby, and slightly briny, making every bite a complex, luxurious experience. For those who craved French-inspired elegance, coq au vin was the next sophisticated choice. Coq au vin.
Here's my attempt to streamline a great French classic for the modern home kitchen. All the key traditional coq au vin elements are here.
Coq au vin wasn't just dinner, it was a culinary experience. This was French comfort food at its finest, made by slowly braising chicken in red wine with mushrooms, onions, bacon, and herbs. It was rich, flavorful, and ridiculously luxurious. If you served this at a dinner party, you were basically announcing your sophistication to the world. The magic of coq au vin was in the depth of flavor. The chicken was tender and juicy, slow cooked to fall off the bone perfection. Braising it in red wine gave it a deep, complex flavor, soaking up the rich, fruity notes of the wine while staying juicy and flavorful. The bacons added a smoky, salty kick, while the mushrooms and onions gave it a savory, umami depth that balanced the rich, wine-soaked chicken. It was earthy, richness, and incredibly satisfying. It was slow-cooked and full of flavor, served straight from the pot for a rustic, elegant presentation. It was rich, warming, and just fancy enough to make you feel like royalty. And the best part? Mopping up the rich sauce with crusty French bread. Switching gears to something a little more extravagant, veal Oscar was the ultimate status symbol. Veal Oscar. If you really wanted to flex your wealth and taste, you ordered veal Oscar. This dish was all about luxury and extravagance, made with tender veal cutlets, topped with crab meat, asparagus, and rich béarnaise sauce. It was decadent, buttery, and outrageously fancy. This wasn't just about the price tag, though it was definitely pricey. It was about layered luxury. The veal was tender and juicy, lightly sautéed to golden perfection. It was delicate and buttery, perfectly complemented by the sweet, succulent crab meat that added a touch of oceanic sweetness. The asparagus was crisp and tender, bringing a bright, fresh crunch that cut through the richness. Topping it all off was béarnaise sauce, a buttery, velvety sauce made from egg yolks, clarified butter, and tarragon, giving it a creamy, herbaceous finish. It was rich, buttery, sweet, and slightly tangy, making every bite a perfectly balanced masterpiece. For those who preferred something a little more adventurous, escargot was the next bold choice. Escargot. Alright, let's get really fancy. Escargot. Yes, we're talking about snails, but don't let that scare you off. In the 60s, eating escargot meant you were worldly, cultured, and just a little bit daring. This wasn't just food, it was a culinary adventure. Cooked in garlic, butter, and parsley, they were rich, garlicky, and surprisingly delicious. Escargot was all about richness and flavor. The snails were tender and delicate, with a mild, earthy flavor that was subtle but satisfying. They were soaked in a bath of garlic butter, absorbing the rich, aromatic flavor that made them buttery, garlicky, and downright addictive. The parsley added a fresh, herby brightness, balancing the rich, garlicky butter perfectly. Eating escargot wasn't just about the taste, it was about the presentation. They were served in elegant porcelain dishes with special snail tongs and tiny forks, turning each bite into a fancy ritual. For those who preferred classic elegance, filet mignon was the next sophisticated bite. Filet mignon.
Today I'm gonna show you how to cook a perfect peppercorn crust petite filet mignon.
When it came to luxury and sophistication, filet mignon was the gold standard. This wasn't just steak, it was the most tender, delicate cut of beef, known for its melt-in-your-mouth texture and rich, buttery flavor. Served medium rare with a perfect pink center, it was soft, juicy, and unbelievably flavorful. If you ordered this, you were flexing your wealth and taste without saying a word. What made filet mignon so legendary was its incredible tenderness. Cut from the tenderloin, this was the least worked muscle on the cow, making it buttery soft and ridiculously tender. It was mild in flavor, but rich and juicy, perfectly seasoned with just salt and pepper or wrapped in smoky bacon for an extra layer of savory richness. Some versions were served with rich, velvety sauces like béarnaise or red wine reduction, giving it a silky, luxurious finish that was smooth and satisfying. Filet mignon was delicate and understated, served without heavy sauces or flashy sides. It was all about letting the meat shine with its incredible tenderness and flavor. Paired with creamy mashed potatoes, grilled asparagus, or a glass of red wine, it made you feel fancy and sophisticated with every bite. But if you preferred a taste of pure extravagance, caviar with blinis came in ready to blow your mind. Caviar with blinis.
Today, let's make Russian-style blini.
If you wanted to flex your wealth in the 60s, you did it with caviar and blinis. Imagine delicate buckwheat pancakes topped with glossy, briny pearls of caviar, finished with a dollop of creme fraiche and a sprinkle of chives. It was salty, creamy, and impossibly luxurious. People didn't just eat this, they savored it with champagne in crystal flutes. The caviar was salty and briny, bursting with a rich oceanic flavor that was deep and complex. Each tiny pearl popped in your mouth, releasing its salty, umami goodness that was bold and satisfying. Paired with fluffy, buttery blinis, the caviar's briny richness was perfectly balanced by the soft, slightly sweet pancakes. The creme fraiche added a creamy, tangy note, rounding out the salty, briny bite with a rich, velvety finish. It was salty, creamy, fluffy, and perfectly balanced, making each bite an explosion of flavor and texture. Served on silver platters with mother-of-pearl spoons, never metal, which alters the flavor, it was elegant and sophisticated. If you were eating this, you were living large and loving it. There was no better way to announce your wealth and taste than with caviar and champagne. For those who wanted a dramatic finish to a luxurious meal, Baked Alaska was the next flamboyant showstopper. Baked Alaska.
Today I'm gonna make a Baked Alaska spectacular.
Baked Alaska was the ultimate dinner party showstopper. This wasn't just dessert, it was a spectacle. Imagine layers of sponge cake and ice cream covered in fluffy meringue, then baked until golden brown on the outside while staying perfectly frozen inside. And if you really wanted to impress, you set it on fire. It was dramatic, delicious, and downright iconic. This dessert was all about contrasts. The sponge cake was soft and light, soaking up the sweet, creamy ice cream that was rich, smooth, and perfectly chilled. Covering it all was a fluffy layer of meringue, whipped to stiff, glossy peaks and toasted to golden perfection. The meringue was sweet and light, slightly crisp on the outside, but soft and marshmallowy on the inside. It was warm and caramelized on the surface, while cold and creamy underneath, making every bite a mix of textures and temperatures. It was warm and cool, light and rich, all at once. Baked Alaska was often brought to the table, flambéed, doused in rum or brandy, and set alight for a dramatic display. Watching the flames dance over the meringue, caramelizing the peaks without melting the ice cream was a total showstopper. It was sweet, creamy, warm, and cold all at once, making it an unforgettable dessert experience. After the fiery drama of Baked Alaska, some people preferred a fruit-forward treat to end the night. That's where Cherry's Jubilee came in. Cherry's Jubilee. Cherry's Jubilee was the dessert that brought the party to the dinner table. This was sweet, boozy, and flambéed, made by simmering cherries in a rich, syrupy sauce of brandy and sugar, then setting it on fire tableside. It was warm, sweet, and just a little bit boozy, served over rich, creamy vanilla ice cream. If you were serving this, you were living large and loving it. The secret to Cherry's Jubilee was in the balance of flavors. The cherries were plump and juicy, bursting with a natural sweetness and a slight tartness that was bright and fruity. Simmered in a sauce made from brandy and sugar, they became rich, syrupy, and just a little bit sticky, soaking up the sweet, caramelized flavor of the reduced brandy. When flambéed tableside, the alcohol burned off, leaving behind a rich, complex flavor that was warm, sweet, and slightly smoky. Paired with cold, creamy vanilla ice cream, it was hot and cold, sweet and creamy all at once. But to be honest, the fire was the real flex. Bringing a pan of flaming cherries to the table wasn't just dramatic, it was iconic. The flames danced and flickered, caramelizing the cherries and making the whole room smell warm. Next up, beef bourguignon came in, bringing French comfort food to the next level of luxury. Beef bourguignon. If you wanted comfort food with a side of luxury, you went for beef bourguignon. This wasn't just a stew, it was slow-braised elegance, made with tender chunks of beef simmered in red wine with mushrooms, onions, carrots, and herbs. It was rich, hearty, and ridiculously flavorful, served with buttery mashed potatoes or crusty French bread for the ultimate comfort food experience. This dish was all about depth of flavor. The beef was melt-in-your-mouth tender, slowly braised in red wine and beef stock until it was juicy, rich, and infused with flavor. The red wine gave it a bold, fruity depth, while the beef stock added a savory, meaty richness that made the sauce velvety and thick. The mushrooms were earthy and meaty, soaking up the rich, wine-soaked sauce, while the carrots and onions added sweetness and depth. It was rich, savory, sweet, and earthy, all at once. This wasn't just about rich, bold flavor. It was about comfort and tradition. Served in big, generous bowls with buttery mashed potatoes or crusty French bread, it was warm, hearty, and ridiculously satisfying. For those who wanted something a little lighter but just as flavorful, sole meunière was the next sophisticated bite. Sole meunière. Sole meunière was the epitome of elegant simplicity. This was the kind of dish that made you feel like you were dining at a fancy French bistro, even if you were just at home. It was made by lightly dredging delicate sole fillets in flour, then pan-frying them in brown butter until they were golden and crispy. Finished with a squeeze of lemon juice and a sprinkle of parsley, it was light, buttery, and beautifully balanced. What made this dish so legendary was its simplicity and finesse. The sole was delicate and flaky, with a mild, slightly sweet flavor that was subtle and refined. Cooking it in brown butter gave it a rich, nutty flavor, while keeping the edges perfectly crispy and the inside tender and juicy. The lemon juice added a bright, zesty tang, cutting through the rich, buttery sauce and bringing the whole dish to life. This was the kind of meal that didn't need heavy sauces or complicated sides. It was all about simplicity and quality, letting the freshness of the fish and the richness of the butter shine. Paired with steamed asparagus, baby potatoes, or a glass of white wine, it felt light and refreshing, perfect for a summer evening. It was delicate, elegant, and surprisingly easy to love. However, some people wanted something bold and hearty with a little more crunch. That's where Crab Louis salad brought its A-game, bringing seafood decadence with a retro twist. Crab Louis salad.
Today I wanted to share with you guys one of my favorite summertime salad recipes. We'll be making a Crab Louis salad with homemade dressing.
Crab Louis salad was the king of retro salads, served at all the swankiest restaurants and country clubs in the 60s. It was fancy, refreshing, and loaded with seafood, made with tender crab meat piled high on crisp lettuce, surrounded by hard-boiled eggs, tomatoes, asparagus, and avocado, all drizzled with zesty Louis dressing. This was more than just a salad. It was a seafood lover's dream. The crab meat was sweet, tender, and delicate, perfectly flaky, and packed with flavor. It was rich and satisfying without being heavy, giving each bite a burst of ocean-fresh goodness. Paired with crisp, refreshing lettuce and juicy tomato wedges, it was light and vibrant, balanced by the rich, creamy avocado. The hard-boiled eggs were creamy and savory, while the asparagus added a crisp, earthy bite that rounded out the flavors beautifully. It was sweet, creamy, crisp, and refreshing, making it perfectly balanced and satisfying. The magic, though, was in the Louis dressing. Made from mayonnaise, chili sauce, lemon juice, and spices, it was rich, tangy, and just a little bit spicy, giving the salad a zesty kick that tied everything together. It was creamy and flavorful without being overwhelming, coating the crab meat and vegetables with a silky, tangy finish. After the light, refreshing elegance of Crab Louis salad, the only way to keep the seafood decadence going was with lobster thermidor, a rich, creamy dish that took luxury dining to the next level. Lobster thermidor.
Hi, my name's Joel. I'm a chef tutor from the Waitrose Cookery School, and today I'm here cooking a lobster thermidor.
If you wanted to go all out and really impress your dinner guests, lobster thermidor was the way to do it. This was next-level luxury, made with lobster meat sautéed in butter and cognac. then folded into a rich, creamy sauce made from egg yolks, mustard, and heavy cream. It was rich, buttery, and ridiculously decadent, all spooned back into the lobster shell and baked until golden and bubbly. You couldn't serve this without making a statement. The flavors were rich, bold, and perfectly balanced. The lobster meat was sweet and tender, sautéed in butter and cognac for a rich, boozy flavor that was smooth and slightly smoky. The sauce was velvety and creamy, made from egg yolks and heavy cream for a silky, luxurious texture. The mustard added a subtle tang that cut through the richness, while the cognac gave it depth and warmth. Topped with Parmesan cheese and breadcrumbs, it was golden, crispy, and irresistibly rich. Every bite was creamy, buttery, and sweet. Presentation was half the magic. Served in the lobster shell, it was elegant and dramatic, like something straight out of a fine dining restaurant. This wasn't just food, it was art on a plate. Paired with buttery asparagus or a crisp salad, it was rich, flavorful, and perfectly satisfying. Our next entry is a beautiful soup dish, consommé madrilène. Consommé madrilène was refinement in a bowl. This wasn't just any soup. It was crystal clear, delicately flavored, and all about refinement and simplicity. Made from clarified beef broth flavored with tomatoes, herbs, and sherry. It was light, savory, and beautifully fragrant. Served chilled or warm in dainty porcelain cups, it was the kind of starter that made you feel sophisticated with every sip. This soup was all about delicate, balanced flavors. The broth was crystal clear, made by slowly simmering beef bones, vegetables, and herbs, then clarifying it with egg whites to remove all impurities. It was light, fragrant, and full of umami, with a rich, savory depth that was subtle but satisfying. The tomatoes added a hint of sweetness and a slight tang, giving it a bright, fresh flavor that balanced the richness of the beef broth. A splash of sherry added complexity and warmth, making it delicate, savory, and just a little bit boozy. It wasn't just about the taste, it was about elegance and restraint. Consommé madrilène was clear, delicate, and understated, served in tiny, delicate cups with fresh herbs floating on top. It was light and refreshing, a perfect palate cleanser before the rich main courses. After the delicate elegance of consommé madrilène, it was time for something richer and creamier. That's where our next dish comes in, poached salmon with hollandaise.
You're doing my poached salmon with capers and hollandaise sauce.
Oh, that is so good.
Poached salmon with hollandaise was all about buttery, silky perfection. This was the kind of dish that felt light and elegant, but was actually rich and luxurious. Made with tender salmon fillets, poached in white wine and herbs, then drizzled with velvety hollandaise sauce. It was silky, buttery, and just a little bit tangy. Served with asparagus or baby potatoes, it was the definition of elegant simplicity. The flavors were delicate and perfectly balanced. The salmon was tender and flaky, poached gently in white wine and herbs to keep it moist and flavorful. It was light, juicy, and subtly sweet, soaking up the fragrant notes of the white wine without being overpowered. The hollandaise sauce was rich and velvety, made from egg yolks, melted butter, and lemon juice for a smooth, silky finish. It was creamy and buttery, with a slight tang that cut through the richness, balancing the delicate, flaky salmon perfectly. It was all about lightness and elegance. Served on a bed of steamed asparagus or baby potatoes, it felt fresh and luxurious without being overly heavy. It was silky, buttery, and beautifully balanced. The kind of meal that made you feel refined and sophisticated without trying too hard. After the light, silky luxury of poached salmon, some craved bold, earthy flavors. Truffle pâté was next, bringing rich, mushroomy decadence to the table. Truffle pâté. Truffle pâté was the kind of dish that whispered wealth and sophistication without saying a word. If you served this at a party, you weren't just hosting a get-together, you were throwing a high-class soiree. Made from finely ground liver, cream, and truffles, it was rich, silky, and bursting with earthy flavor. Spread on toasted baguette slices or crackers, it was the perfect, luxurious appetizer that made you feel fancy with every bite. The magic of truffle pâté was in the layers of flavor. The liver was smooth and velvety, giving it a creamy, buttery texture that was rich and satisfying. It was seasoned to perfection with just the right amount of spices and herbs to enhance the natural richness of the liver without overpowering it. The real star, though, was the truffle. Infused with truffle oil or shaved truffles, it had a deep, earthy aroma that was rich, fragrant, and beautifully complex. It was savory, buttery, and just a little bit funky, with a mushroomy depth that made made every bite irresistible. This was all about richness and elegance. Served cold or at room temperature with toasted baguette slices, it was creamy and smooth, spreading like silk on warm, crispy bread. Paired with cornichons or caramelized onions, it was savory, tangy, and perfectly balanced. It wasn't just rich and flavorful, it was sophisticated and indulgent, the kind of appetizer that made you feel like you were living the high life. But if you craved something lighter and more refreshing, Vichyssoise came in. Vichyssoise.
Hey, I'm John Cannell, and today on Preppy Kitchen, we're making a delicious, creamy vichyssoise.
Vichyssoise was cool, creamy sophistication in a bowl. This wasn't just any soup. It was chilled, velvety, and impossibly elegant, made from leeks, potatoes, chicken stock, and heavy cream. It was smooth, rich, and perfectly balanced. Served cold in delicate bowls with a sprinkle of chives on top, it was the kind of dish that made you feel fancy just holding the spoon. The secret to vichyssoise was in its smooth, silky texture. The leeks were soft and sweet, sautéed in butter to bring out their mild, delicate flavor. Paired with creamy potatoes, they were simmered in the chicken stock until tender and flavorful, then pureed until perfectly smooth. Adding heavy cream made it rich and velvety, coating your mouth with a silky, buttery finish that was smooth and satisfying. It was creamy and rich, but still light and refreshing, with a mild, sweet flavor that felt cool and soothing. This was the kind of dish that was all about refinement. Served chilled with a sprinkle of chives for a pop of color and a hint of oniony brightness, it was delicate and elegant without feeling heavy. It was light, creamy, and beautifully balanced, perfect for a hot summer day or as a refreshing starter before a rich main course. It was sophisticated and understated, making you feel fancy without being flashy. After the cool, creamy luxury of vichyssoise, some people craved something warmer and fluffier. Cheese soufflé was next, bringing light, airy decadence to the table. Cheese soufflé.
So this is our cheese soufflé. I'm going to show you how to make this. Everybody can make this. This is so simple. This is a foolproof cheese soufflé.
Cheese soufflé was a dish that was all about flair and finesse. It wasn't just about the taste. It was about the drama of watching it rise. Made with whipped egg whites folded into a rich cheese sauce, it was light, airy, and perfectly golden. It came out of the oven tall and fluffy, with a delicate crust and a melt-in-your-mouth center that was rich, cheesy, and impossibly light. Total culinary magic. The secret to a perfect cheese soufflé was in the texture. The egg whites were whipped to stiff peaks, giving it a light, airy lift that made it puff up like a cloud. The cheese sauce was rich and velvety, made from melted Gruyere or cheddar for a bold, savory flavor. It was smooth and creamy, perfectly seasoned with a hint of nutmeg or a dash of cayenne for a little kick. Every bite was rich and cheesy, but light and fluffy at the same time, melting on your tongue with a burst of savory goodness. This wasn't just about the flavor, it was about the wow factor. A cheese soufflé was delicate and temperamental, rising high and proud in the oven, but deflating the moment it was cut. It was light as air, but rich and flavorful, making it a true culinary masterpiece. Paired with a crisp salad or a glass of white wine, it felt fancy and fun without being heavy or overwhelming. If you wanted something richer and bolder, Steak Diane was also available. Steak Diane.
Well, hello there, friends. An old classic again today, Steak Diane. Very, very popular in the 70s and the 80s.
Steak Diane was all about showmanship. This wasn't just a steak, it was a performance. Cooked tableside with a dramatic flambe, it was rich, flavorful, and full of flair. Made with tender filet mignon, pan-seared to perfection, and doused in a brandy cream sauce. It was bold and buttery. If you ordered this, you were living large and loving it. The secret was in the sauce. The steak was tender and juicy, cooked to a perfect medium rare for maximum flavor and tenderness. It was rich and savory, seasoned simply with salt and pepper to let the natural beefy flavor shine. But the sauce, that was the showstopper. Made from brandy, Dijon mustard, heavy cream, Worcestershire sauce, and shallots, it was rich, creamy, and tangy, with a smoky, boozy finish that was smooth and satisfying. It was bold and flavorful, coating the juicy, tender steak with a velvety, tangy layer of saucy goodness. This dish wasn't just about rich, bold flavor, it was about the performance. The brandy was ignited tableside, sending flames leaping up in a dramatic display that was half dinner, half magic show. It was bold, saucy, and just a little flashy, perfect for a special occasion or a show-off moment. After the flamboyant drama of Steak Diane, some people craved something even more extravagant. Interestingly, That's where pheasant under glass did its job. Pheasant under glass. Pheasant under glass was the ultimate status symbol, made with tender pheasant cooked in a rich, creamy sauce, then served under a glass dome to trap the aromas. It was rich, flavorful, and ridiculously extravagant. This was the kind of dish that made you feel like royalty. The flavors were rich and complex. The pheasant was tender and juicy, with a delicate, slightly gamey flavor that was rich and satisfying. It was braised or roasted, then drenched in a creamy sauce made from Madeira wine, heavy cream, and truffles, giving it a rich, earthy flavor that was smooth and luxurious. The sauce was velvety and creamy, soaking into the juicy, tender pheasant and giving it a silky, buttery finish. Every bite was rich, juicy, and beautifully seasoned, making it an unforgettable experience. It wasn't just about the flavor, it was about the presentation. Served under a glass dome, the rich, fragrant aromas were trapped and intensified, giving the first whiff a powerful, luxurious punch. It was theatrical and over the top, the kind of dish that turned heads and made you feel fancy and important. After the dramatic flair of pheasant under glam, rum baba was the perfect way to wrap up an extravagant meal with a sweet, syrupy twist. Rum baba.
In today's video, we're making rum baba, so let's go to the kitchen, check it out.
Rum baba was the sweet, boozy delight that made dessert feel like a party. This wasn't just a cake. It was a sponge cake soaked in rum syrup, served with whipped cream or pastry cream for a sweet, fluffy finish. It was rich, syrupy, and just a little bit naughty, perfect for ending a fancy meal on a high note. The cake was light and fluffy, made from yeasted dough that was soft, airy, and slightly spongy. It was light and delicate, soaking up the rich syrup without getting too heavy or dense. The rum syrup was sweet and sticky, made from sugar, water, and a generous splash of dark rum, giving the cake a rich caramelized flavor with a warm, boozy kick. It was sweet, sticky, fluffy, and just a little bit boozy, making every bite a burst of flavor and texture. But this wasn't just about the taste, it was about the fun. Served with whipped cream, pastry cream, or fresh fruit, it was light and refreshing with a sweet, creamy contrast to the rich cake. Some people even added more rum tableside, making it even richer and more indulgent. It was sweet, creamy, and deliciously irresistible, the kind of dessert that made you feel like you were celebrating something big. After the up and down decadence experience, Waldorf salad was the perfect way to end a luxurious meal. Waldorf salad.
The Waldorf salad is a classic fruit and nut salad.
Waldorf salad was the fancy, fruity classic that made salads feel like a treat. This wasn't just lettuce and dressing, it was crisp apples, juicy grapes, celery, and walnuts, tossed in a creamy mayonnaise dressing and served on a bed of fresh lettuce. It was sweet, crunchy, and refreshing, the perfect balance of fruit and cream that felt light and satisfying. The secret to Waldorf salad was in the contrast of flavors and textures. The apples were crisp and juicy, bringing a sweet, tart crunch that was light and refreshing. The grapes were sweet and juicy, bursting with natural sweetness that balanced the tartness of the apples. The celery was crisp and slightly bitter, adding a savory, crunchy contrast that kept the salad from feeling too sweet. The walnuts were rich and nutty, bringing a buttery crunch that added depth and texture to every bite. It was sweet, crunchy, nutty, and perfectly balanced, making each forkful a delightful mix of flavors and textures. But the real magic was in the dressing, made from mayonnaise and lemon juice. It was creamy and tangy, coating the fruit and nuts in a silky, velvety layer of sweet, tangy goodness. It was rich and creamy without being heavy, giving the salad a light, refreshing feel that was smooth and satisfying. Paired with crisp lettuce leaves, it was an amazing dish. And so we've come to the end of our list of dishes that defined upper-class dining in the 60s. Looking back, it's wild to see how much dining culture has changed. Today, it's all about minimalism and farm to table, but back then, the fancier, the better. Rich, buttery sauces, extravagant plating, and dramatic tableside preparations were all the rage. It wasn't just about what you ate, it was about how you ate it and who you were eating it with. And even though times have changed, the charm and allure of these dishes live on. Who knows, maybe it's time for a comeback. After all, nothing says luxury dining quite like flambeing dessert at the table. Do let me know what you think in the comment, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this. See you in the next video, guys.